The fields were full. The silos were stocked. The contracts were signed. And then, nothing. On May 22, 2025, the U.S. Department of Agriculture reported something rare: a sharp reversal in wheat exports. For the first time in more than 10 years, canceled wheat orders outnumbered new sales by 128,800 metric tons. There were no protests, no explanations. The buyers simply walked away. In Washington, President Trump insisted his tariff policies were designed to support American farmers. But by late May, Bloomberg reported wheat futures had dropped 8.3%. Across the Midwest, grain elevators were overflowing with unsold wheat. "We're growing the wheat," one Kansas farmer told Reuters, "but we're not moving it." Meanwhile, America's quiet northern competitor, Canada, recorded a 40% jump in wheat exports to the European Union, according to the Financial Times. Global buyers didn't wait. They rerouted vessels, rewrote contracts, and reset expectations. U.S. wheat wasn't just skipped, it was replaced. Take the Philippines. Historically, they imported nearly 3 million tons of U.S. wheat each year. In 2025, that demand collapsed. A 110,000-ton deal was rerouted, split between Canadian and Australian suppliers. It wasn't about price, it was about trust. "We had containers sitting at port for 3 weeks due to U.S. paperwork inconsistencies," said Ricardo Pinca, executive director of the Philippine Association of Flour Millers. "Canadian grain arrives on time, in spec, every time." In South Korea, U.S. market share was cut in half, dropping from 35% to 17% between late 2024 and June 2025. The issue? Glyphosate residue. Korea's new limit capped it at 200 parts per billion. U.S. wheat tested as high as 420. Canadian wheat, meanwhile, consistently tested under 70, according to Korea's Ministry of Agriculture. Food giants like Nongshim and Orion made the switch overnight. They didn't wait for U.S. regulators. They restructured their supply chains. Mexico's shift was even more painful. The U.S. used to export over 3 million tons of wheat to Mexico annually. In 2025, those imports dropped 40%. Canada and Argentina filled the gap. The reason? A single customs delay at the Texas border in April triggered shutdowns at flour mills in Sonora and Chihuahua. By June, Mexican millers had signed new 5-year contracts with suppliers in Alberta. It wasn't about quality, it was about reliability. Even Europe moved on. France, where bread is practically sacred, cut U.S. wheat imports to their lowest level in 20 years. Kansas co-ops missed shipment after shipment due to failed chemical compliance and outdated carbon certifications. One missing EPA document and the entire container is flagged, a French customs official told Le Monde. Canadian shipments, by contrast, cleared without a hitch. Italy, the heartland of pasta and durum wheat, used to be a heavy importer of U.S. grain. Now, Canadian wheat supplies 45% of its market, up from just 12% in 2023. The U.S. now accounts for only 15%. Italian millers cited better gluten strength, consistent inspections, and zero tariff surprises from Canadian exporters. Their decision wasn't loud, but it was final. This wasn't a pricing issue. The U.S. still grows some of the best wheat in the world. The soil hadn't changed. Farmers hadn't forgotten how to farm. What changed was certainty. And once the market sensed uncertainty, loyalty disappeared. Egypt, the world's largest wheat importer, used to buy thousands of tons from the U.S. In 2025, nearly all of it came from Russia, not because it tasted better, but because it arrived on time. U.S. shipments were delayed, insurance costs surged. Cairo turned to Moscow. By August, Russia had secured a multi-billion-dollar subsidy-backed deal. The U.S. didn't even make the short list. Indonesia followed suit. For over a decade, it had been America's second-largest wheat buyer in Asia. In 2025, Jakarta quietly restructured its contracts, favoring Russian and Ukrainian exporters. The Jakarta Post reported that shipping from the Black Sea was faster. US wheat was more expensive, less flexible, and bogged down in paperwork. Too many delays. Too much risk, said Hendro Satrio, procurement executive at Indofoods. Brazil surprised everyone. Once a wheat importer, by mid-2025, it became an emerging exporter. Thanks to record government investment and climate-friendly harvests, Brazil began shipping wheat to Mexico and Nigeria, two markets long dominated by US firms. The World Bank didn't call it a seasonal shift. They called it structural. Germany, focused on environmental compliance, rejected US wheat for failing to meet EU Green Deal standards. According to DyeSite, US shipping paperwork lacked traceable carbon data. Canada's wheat met all requirements. QR codes on each shipment linked back to blockchain-verified farm records. German millers quietly updated their sourcing. The US disappeared from the list. Nigeria, Africa's fastest-growing flour market, stopped buying US wheat altogether. Instead, it signed a 5-year exclusive deal with Russia. Officially, logistics were cited, but pricing and sanction evasion tactics likely played a role. When the US tried to re-enter, procurement teams had already moved on. Bangladesh, once a bulk buyer of US wheat, saw US market share collapse below 2% in 2025. The buyers shifted to India, Ukraine, and Russia. Port fees and shipping-led times were the tipping points. A local buyer told the Daily Star, "It's not about quality. It's about who shows up when they say they will." That's not America right now. In Kenya, the government implemented a blockchain-based wheat traceability program. Canadian exporters adapted. US companies were invited. None submitted bids. The contract went to Saskatchewan growers, without competition. "We don't chase paperwork," said the Kenyan trade minister. "We chase performance." Back in Minnesota, a mid-sized grain co-op shut down its export operations, not due to a shortage of grain, but a shortage of trust. "We're not out of wheat," said Mark Dennis, general manager of the Central Prairie Co-op. "We're out of buyers. We're not out of wheat. We're out of confidence." His team shifted focus toward ethanol, toward feedlots. Exporting, he said, just isn't dependable anymore. Diplomats scrambled to salvage deals. US trade envoys held reform pitches in Sao Paulo, Jakarta, and Berlin. They promised faster inspections, fewer permit delays, and tariff rollbacks. Buyers listened politely and kept walking. "You can't fix credibility with a PowerPoint," said Luciana de Oliveira, senior trader at Cereal Par, in an interview with Valor Económico. At the Port of Los Angeles, wheat shipments hit their lowest point in a decade, according to the Wall Street Journal. Shipping agents blamed disorganized coordination and last-minute EPA audits. "It's like scheduling surgery during a blackout," one freight manager said. "You're never sure the system will hold." So, buyers picked a different hospital. In Washington, hearings were held. Reports were filed. Statements were made. But on the wheat fields of Oklahoma and Texas, farmers had only one question: where did the buyers go? Meanwhile, in Saskatchewan, trains ran full. Export terminals moved with efficiency. Buyers from Egypt, France, South Korea, and Mexico signed contracts without hesitation. Not because Canadian wheat is magical, but because Canada has mastered being predictable. And in global trade, predictability is power. Back in Nebraska, a third-generation wheat farmer stares at his empty order book. "They used to call," he says. "Now they don't." His neighbors have switched to lentils. He keeps planting wheat, not out of optimism, but out of tradition. And quietly he wonders, how many more years can I afford to do this? No one answers. Because this story isn't just about wheat. It's about every American export. The global market didn't scream. It didn't send angry letters. It simply turned the page. The new winners in trade aren't cheaper. They're steadier. In today's economy, trust isn't a vibe. It's a metric. And in 2025, the US fell short. This wasn't a collapse. It was a quiet replacement. The market didn't break. It evolved without waiting. One American co-op decided to take a chance. They digitized their paperwork, partnered with a Canadian logistics firm, and promised 48-hour customs clearance. In June, they shipped 5,000 tons of hard red spring wheat to Spain. It arrived on time, on spec, without a single regulatory issue. For the first time in nearly a year, the buyer signed a repeat contract. It wasn't a comeback. It was a beginning. So, what now? If you've watched this far, here's the shift that matters. To regain its place, America must let go of the myth that quality alone secures loyalty, in wheat or in anything else. The new global currency is reliability, and right now, Canada is cashing in. The world hasn't stopped needing American wheat, it's just stopped chasing it. Buyers didn't leave out of spite. They left out of fatigue. One missed deadline became a trend. One compliance slip became standard. One trade war became a strategy, and then came the silence. In trade, silence isn't empty, it's full. It means the buyer has moved on, politely, professionally, permanently. If America wants that phone to ring again, it doesn't need another press release. It needs a new track record, because the future won't be won with subsidies or slogans. It'll be won in spreadsheets. One clean contract, one accurate document, one shipment delivered exactly as promised. Every time, no drama, no surprises.